Hello, everyone who's here to attend our communications panel today. This is the numerous, I think they've been going since April, and this is for those who are new to the group here and attending. This is a group of professionals in the design-related community that have all come together during this time of global change to form a sense of community and connections with each other. So today, we've got a great group here, and the discussion we're going to have today is about the art of the pivot. And so the word pivot today, I was thinking about that just before we were getting ready to have everybody. And pivot has become the word of 2020, I would say, really, has become the prevalent word. Whereas I would say 2019, the word was disruptor. Everybody talked about disruptions in the marketplace. And so pivot means different things to different people. So today we're going to have a conversation with each of the four panelists that are here about what pivot means to them. And sometimes it can mean change. It can mean many different things depending on where you are with your business. So before we really get started, what I'd like to do is just have everybody introduce themselves and tell us who you are and the name of your business. And then we'll get started. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Laura Thurman with Thurman Design Studio, and I'm in Nashville, Tennessee.
I'm Beth Bender, and I'm with the Dev Agency and Designer Discovery.
I'm Donna Benedetto, and I'm with Donna Benedetto Designs in Connecticut.
And I'm Melissa Mittag with Collyer Company, based here in New York.
And I'm Beth Dempsey from Images and Details, and I'm based in Connecticut. So thank you all for joining us today. So we've all, especially in the last, I would say, 6 to 9 months, have had a certain amount of time to be reflecting on our businesses as we, observed what's happening in the outside world. And so I pose to you some initial sorts of questions and things to think about, but this is going to be a much more lively topic than what I put on paper. And I really am looking forward to hearing how each of you and the different things that you've done in your business and what challenges and things that you've encountered. So one of the first questions that I asked you all, and as we briefly said, you've each taken a different turn to it. So why don't we start off with what I had mentioned was about 3 words to talk about your business. And the purpose of that is to really sort of focus in on, as you've been in business and you've had careers, what it was, what it is, and what it's going to be. Because the only way that you can move forward is to be able to have something out there to go towards. So let's talk a little bit about, as they say, you look and glance at your past, you don't stare at it. So go ahead. So whoever wants to start and talk, Beth, do you tell me what you're how you interpreted the question that I asked?
Sure. I was really thinking about kind of adjectives that really describe the tasks that I was doing at each of these stages that you're talking about. And I think that when I started my company, it was really about just assistance. It was how can I assist people? It was a lot of tactical implementation work, and it wasn't as much forward thinking about what I was going to be doing as what I was doing in the moment to try to just assist, as I was going along. And as I got further into my business and I formed deeper relationships with my clients and in the industry, I think it really moved towards collaboration. And I would say that's where I am, at the moment, and where I've been for a little while now, is just really figuring out how to create a boutique firm that can really work with my clients and help them, even if I'm not the one that can do it, finding that right person that can and bringing the people to the table to collaborate with. And I think where I'm going is really all about engagement and understanding that none of us are on an island and we need each other desperately, more so now than ever. And so what does that look like? And I think that that's where, for me, I think kind of the future is becoming even more engaged in the overall industry as a whole, to be able to thrive in business, because I think it's important right now.
Engagement really, I think, is key. And that's, I mean, that's one of the great things about having something like Zoom here, as we were talking about, that it really allows you to engage. I mean, the chances of me getting on a plane just randomly and going to Nashville to see Laura, or, you know, going to Texas, you know, and, you know, Melissa doesn't live too far, but the chances of getting together in person take much longer. And I mean, you know, Donna's here in the same state as I am, and, you know, it could be weeks or months before we get to see each other. So today, you know, it allows us to have that engagement with people, and it'll be different touch points that we have. Oh, it's a little wind here. Donna, I know that you took a completely different approach to what are 3 words about?
I did. So I was thinking more in terms, since we were talking about pivoting, about pretty much, you know, how we operate our businesses. And for me, I'd say, you know, the past for me was really operating in a very standard approach where I'd set up client meetings and, you know, go out and create a presentation for a client and do that presentation in person. So kind of followed a standard protocol of client meetings, if you will. And I'd say right now, everything is so spontaneous. Everybody feels comfortable, you know, operating their businesses or having meetings in very different ways. And so it's spontaneous in the sense that, you know, we're having meetings outside, we're having meetings from the trunk of our car, you know, we're operating in very different fashions. And so we're using that spontaneity with whatever someone feels comfortable with. And I think the future is really about operating in a very current fashion, paying attention to, you know, the current market trends, and really working toward the whole virtual experience and how we can all step up our games. I think, you know, in the past we operated in a sense with projects didn't move along as quickly because you were waiting for those client meetings. And I think now everybody wants things yesterday. So how can we be operating our businesses and moving things along on a daily basis to keep forward moving every day?
So do you feel that you're a little bit more in control now in some respects in this new environment?
You know, I started making changes about a year ago. So I think for me, I've taken those and maybe during this pandemic time, just amplified some of the things I had already started. And so I think when the pandemic came, it allowed me to not feel like I was starting from ground zero, because I already had implemented some changes. So I think in that way, you know, it's made a change.
So Laura, what's the feeling for you about, you know, you've been had an interior design practice, and so, like, has it changed, or have you felt a need, you know, in addressing just, you know, if the different parts of where you are and whatnot? Is there?
Yeah, I feel like where I was when I first started my business was so much about like education. Like I just needed to educate myself in this arena, how to navigate it successfully, profitably. You know, there's so many more tools now available than even just like 4 or 5 years ago. And so I felt like I was really just like trying to learn and kind of like pull the pieces of the puzzle together. And now at current, you know, in present time, I feel that the business is more about maybe discovery and diversifying the business, meaning thinking about different ways to bring in different revenue streams. I just find just a lot of the conversations, whether it's collaborations with brands or, you know, going after press, like just diversifying sort of like my efforts a little bit more and all in the hopes of strengthening the business, right? So that it like stays consistent and I'll be here for, you know, 30 years later. And then the future for me sort of really is heavily weighted in just sort of life balance. I think that's a big topic right now with people who, you know, things are kind of manic. Like for me, working from home, that's sort of how it's always been. I've actually really enjoyed that. But for others who are just like stuck at home now and finding balance with their family and their kids and yet being able to be focused and get work done. And so just where sort of like me and my dog and my husband's little unit is at, we're working towards some other things. So, but ultimately the future is about balance. like having personal balance and work balance.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of those conversations. So Melissa, you've been in different places and of the group, as I said, when I started to look at, the three, Beth and Donna and Laura all have had, they're all interior designers, and you come from a little bit different perspective in the design community. I sort of look at it, I'm like, okay, why is it that designers always want to do something in addition and more? Is it not, are they like gluttons for punishment? Or are they, so I'm like, okay. And as you started to say, Melissa, you were trained, but you're like, heck no, I'm not going in that direction. So talk a little bit about where, those three components to you and your career.
Well, I mean, my working career began way back when in private equity, of all things. And that was my first pivot. And I decided that I loved interiors and objects. And so I went and got a degree in interior design. And then I realized, actually, I don't really like it. I'm not. There are so many other people who are so much better at it than me, and I really wasn't a fan of working with clients in the way that I thought that I had been. And I focused then really on the thing that I did love, which were the objects that you all specify. And I was extremely lucky. I found a position with Gracie Wall Covering way back when. I think it was 2000, actually. And so, my word about where I'm coming from has always been about sales and marketing and brand management. I have worked for a couple of manufacturers. I've worked for a large interior design firm. And really, when I thought about the three words, it's really for me about strategy. It's about looking at what people do and how can I support that? How can I serve them? How can I help them build their businesses from a strictly business perspective, but also how can I help them evolve in terms of their visibility and in terms of the opportunities that are available to them in the future. And so really, my word for what's next is all about collaboration. Unlike the three of you, or the four of you really, Beth, because you're part of this conversation as well, I left this corporate background earlier this spring to open my own business. And what I thought I would be doing as a business strategist has evolved based on everything that we've been experiencing, because I've really had to not pivot, but certainly tweak and meet my clients where they are and serve them in the way that they need me right now.
So the points that are sort of interesting in hearing is that, it's, if you look at vocabulary today and you think about look, if I asked you a year ago and we were having this conversation, I think it would honestly be a different conversation in some respects. I think that the words of engagement, collaboration, vision, strengthening, coming together, I think those are what the silver linings of this experience that have allowed us to reflect, to find that balance. Because for so many people, they just felt that they were going along, you're running your business. And a lot of times people don't change unless there's a problem. Mm-hmm. Or something else, either something environmentally happens in the world, like what we're dealing with now, or something personally is happening to you and you're like, I'm married now, or I've moved, I'm commuting, and, I want to have children, and how am I going to do this as one? So I need to add people, I need to do different things. So with that, I think, talk a little bit about, because I think it's interesting that each of you has done different things in addition to interior design, and how you sort of made the change, made the pivot, because pivot by definition is it's just a small little turn and it can change everything. It doesn't have to be monumental to make a difference. And I think that's for people who are new in business or have been doing, as one of you was saying, you have a set way of doing things. And I think that society and the timing has created something now. So your eyes are different. It's like, oh, well, the same way we did things really doesn't work anymore. So we absolutely may be forced to make these changes. And so, you know, Beth, talk a little bit, you know, you came from, I think your mom was a designer, you came from that. And so you have a different perspective of what you're doing now than what that is. And how did that come about? And how did it feel to do that? Were you forced to do it? Did you see an opportunity, you know?
I think it's funny. I think my entire career has just been a series of pivots, and every one that I thought was going to be small, like you said, has taken me into a huge, you know, a hugely different direction. But my mom was an interior designer. My dad was a home builder, and I grew up on a construction site. And really it was like, you're going in the family business. And I said, no, I'm not. And decided I'm going to do something totally different. I'm being an elementary school teacher. And I got through my first year of elementary education, and God bless teachers, because they deserve all the praise in the world, and they just are amazing, because I got through 1 year of it and thought, I can't do it. I'm not equipped for it. I don't have the skills for it. And so I pivoted at that point and said, I'm going to get a degree in human and organizational development, and I'm going to go corporate, and that's what I'm going to do. And so I came out of college, and that's where I was going. And I had a wonderful surprise, which was my first child a lot sooner in life than I thought I was. And my job required a lot of travel. And, you know, I was so excited about having this big corporate career and realized that's not happening. And, you know, thank the Lord for family. They brought me back into the family business and said, come on in, you know, you can come here. And so I fell back into this family of interior design and home building. And I did love it. And I started my own firm at one point and ran that for quite a long time. But I think for me, what has always caused me to pivot is when I've started to notice that I don't have a passion. Whether it was I didn't have a passion for elementary age kids, to where I had more of a passion to be home and available for my firstborn. And so I wanted to stay home and be close to him, to realizing that I really didn't have a passion for interior design. I had a huge passion, though, for the people that were in the community that were my peers and my friends. And I found myself so much more excited about talking to them about how to improve their processes and systems. And so that was really the point for me to realize, okay, I could keep doing this and I'm good at it, but it's not necessarily where my gifts are being best utilized. And so that pivot, I think at that point in my life was the most, I would say the most profound, because I feel like I had finally gotten to an age where I accepted that maybe if I wasn't passionate about something, I didn't just have to keep slugging along and doing it, that I really could take a risk, and that there were some risks worth taking. So for me, I would say it's that passion side of it has really guided every one of my pivots. And I can say I'm in the perfect spot for me now, which is just supporting other designers and other creatives in the way I wish I could have been supported back when I was doing it. And so I do think that it's so hard to pivot, and you're right. These little pivots can end up being a life-changing, and every one of mine has been. So
I'll tell you, so what was I went to a workshop. I went to this positivity workshop. And one of the things that the facilitator said, it's like doing the dishes. You just start with one dish and you wash it. And then you get to the next dish. I've been saying this now. People keep texting me. They're like, that's really true. It's like some days I'm so overwhelmed and I think of the dishes, and it gives you a visual. My other little tidbit, and then I'd like to hear from Donna, because I think that passion is something that does definitely carry through, is that my 91-year-old father-in-law, who was like still incredibly active, I wrote a newsletter on pivoting, and like I sent it over. I like to get his little opinion. And I at the end, and he says, so what's your end game? I said, excuse me? I said, it's 8 o'clock at night. I've been working all day. I just wanted to send this. He goes, no. Why do this if you don't have an end game? You're in the newsletter. What's your end game? What do you want out of this? And I was like, okay, I got it. You know? So I think that when you do go to make changes, it's like, you got to think through, and it's little things, you know, it's the little teeny changes that can add up, and they don't have to be so frightening. So Donna, you have an interesting sort of story to tell, you know, about the different things and where you've been and how you're sort of moving along. So
Oh yeah, I've pivoted more times than you can count. And I am somebody, so it's interesting when you talk about pivot, right? There's larger pivots and there's smaller pivots. And I'm someone who kind of evaluates my business on a weekly basis, evaluates my personal life, what I want to be doing, what excites me. Beth, you absolutely hit the nail on the head. Passion is key. I think when you're passionate about something, everything just flows. There's an energy that flows, it's easy, and you're invested in what you're doing. But I've had a lot of pivots. I owned a retail store for many years, had children, and when I had very young kids, I was buying and selling antiques, refurbishing them, and putting them in antique booths. And it allowed me to be home with my family, but still have an income and still have, a business of my own. And then I moved into decorative painting. I trained all over the United States with different decorative artists, and I developed that into a business, doing high-end paint finishes for other fellow interior designers and homeowners. And I grew that. I learned so much from the other interior designers, but then fellow homeowners would say, "Oh, can you decorate my house?" So I was like, well, sure, because I was really at these clients' houses and giving advice for hours on end, but really not getting paid for it. And I thought, well, I really might have something here. So I turned that into a business, and that kept growing. I would say one of my biggest pivots was when the economy tanked in 2008, and I kind of designed a construction management package for my clients where I would remodel kitchens and bathrooms. And that was huge. I mean, I would say my business doubled at that time. So I've let passion and things that I'm interested in. I was always interested in flipping houses. I flipped a house at that time. And then I stopped the decorative painting and was just doing the interior design and construction management. But, as Beth, you and I have talked, I've come full circle. A couple of years ago, I had trouble finding artwork for clients, shopped all over, was looking for something in a price point, couldn't find anything. And I thought, oh, maybe it's time to pick up my brushes, but this time to canvas. So, and I found that once I started, I really loved it. I found that other interior designers were looking for things as well. So I think sometimes pivot points in our business can be things that we're just finding lacking in the market, or things that we're having trouble with, and maybe it's something that we can pivot into, or we have a little bit of a history there. But I definitely think passion has to be part of the pivot point, because then you're really invested. And I think you have to be changing with the times nowadays. And it's important to, at least for me, I find evaluating my business on a more weekly or bi-weekly basis. I'm most comfortable making smaller pivots than larger pivots. I don't feel like it's so much time, or I have to make so much of a change that it's not doable. These smaller changes, they're doable. You can make those small changes along the way.
Well, and it's feedback too, I think. And, I think in what I'm hearing is, it's a check and balance.
Yes.
You start to see, and as you say, when they're littler things, it's not as scary.
I think, like Laura said also earlier, there's a lot of that work-life balance as well, and keeping that all into consideration with this.
Yeah, I think that's probably, as you say, has been a big thing that's affected people today much more so, is realizing we were, the world was not right. We were really, a lot of us were completely out of whack. We were working like nonstop. And you talk of anyone who has children that are of an age, from teenagers on up, and they're like, I don't want to be anything like my parents. Like, you people work like crazy, like nonstop. You may be passionate, but it's just nonstop. And I think this time has also allowed people to reflect. And as Laura, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the changes that you've made, and how, they've affected your life in doing them, and what, has come about because of that.
Yeah, I feel like, in the design community, and maybe ladies, some of you guys have experienced this, but I do think in interior design, you can kind of like be boxed into a corner, or it's sort of like within the industry, you're sort of forced to have a certain design aesthetic, or like you're either a luxury designer or you're not. And, you know, like these gaps or these sort of like titles become very kind of permanent. And if you're a part of, you know, the Facebook business communities, and if you're like really out there to educate and, you know, really inspire your business, keep it going, keep yourself passionate, you can get a little bogged down. And so I think for me, one of the biggest pivots is really like identifying what I want my business to look like for me and what success looks like. And it doesn't mean like, you know, I'm successful just because I do multi-million-dollar properties. Like that's not necessarily what that means. Or it doesn't mean I'm going to be more fulfilled when I do that. And so I think from, you know, one of the pivots early on in my career was like, I had like an idea of what I wanted my business to look like, but I don't think that idea really came from me. I think it was like a lot of noise from the outside. Like, this is what it should be. Like, you know, you need to strive for this kind of caliber of client and this sort of caliber of project. And if you're not doing that, you're kind of like not a designer or something, you know, that's sort of how I would feel. And as I got older, and just when you do get experience and you get really great projects under your belt, and maybe you have a client who is kind of up in that topper echelon that you've really reached, and then all those realities of that project and that type of project hit you. I think that's just a pivot that's happened, I'd say within the last year. It's just really identifying like what success and what happiness and passion looks like for me in my own firm, and not to compare it to anyone else. You know, every business is different. And so I think when I did that, I thought, you know, I want to pivot my business to not leave any money on the table. Like, yeah, I have a degree in interior architecture. I love the renovations, build a new house, do an addition, furnish a whole thing. But I also have found lots of joy in doing just 3 rooms. You know, like it doesn't have to be this huge mega project. I find so much fulfillment with sometimes, you know, the smaller jobs, and or even those clients who really can't afford a designer, finding different ways to, you know, curate a service for them while being, you know, considerate of my time and my energy, making sure I'm getting paid for it and all of that. But I think it just sort of opened it up. Like it just opened up the possibilities and what type of work I was getting once I sort of just defined what, you know, success looked like for me, and decided to diversify my services some.
So services has been key to you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and the word I hear is possibilities.
Yeah,
So
like
I think being open, you know, I'm hearing that, you know, being open to trying new things. And, you know, case in point, like Melissa, you've tried on different hats and different roles, you know, and in a corporate environment, you know, going from a family business, I considered like Fromental in some ways a family business, to a much more corporate firm at J. Banks. You know, you in a corporate world, you had to personally pivot to go from one, you know, whole sort of dynamic and personality of a business to another and structured. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about those kinds of things, and then what you sort of kept in mind now in starting your own business within the last 6 months, because, you know, you're doing this in the throes of everything around you sort of, you know, swirling.
Crazy, right?
I have to say, I'm so excited for you, Melissa. I just have to say that. Congrats to you for starting.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes.
This time, I mean, it's been surprisingly wonderful. I'm working, I have clients, I have things that I have had the opportunity to do that I wouldn't have had were I not sort of on lockdown and what have you. Every pivot I've ever made, including this one, has been driven by my lack of passion for what I was doing right before I pivoted. So, you know, when I was working for that large wallpaper, you know, luxury wallpaper manufacturer, I'd been there for 9 years. I could see that the changes that we had all talked about, the things that really excited me, were maybe not going to happen. And so then I started looking at what I was doing, and if I was really happy, if I was juiced by it, if I you know, was enthusiastic, and I really wasn't. And I looked at my background and I realized that I needed to make a change. So I started consulting And while I was still working, just a little dabbling on the side, and I realized that what I really wanted to do is what I'm actually doing right now, but that there was a large sort of learning curve, an education gap. I'd never actually worked in an interior design firm. And if I was going to help interior designers really try to grow their businesses for them or with them, I really wanted to understand how it all worked. So those, I wouldn't say I examine my business on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. I literally think about, when I'm thinking about my business as opposed to doing the work that people have hired me to do, it's almost on a moment by moment basis. So I'm constantly like recalibrating. And I think, with COVID, which I have seen and experienced to be an incredible opportunity and, obviously extremely tragic as well, but it has really kind of underscored that approach for me, which is, we're going to try this. If it doesn't work, that isn't failure in a negative sense. Failure in its most simple form is actually feedback. So that doesn't work. Let's just shift just a little bit and try that. And then let's tweak it this way. And yes, 6 months ago, I thought I was going to be doing something very specific. And what I'm doing now is really customized to each client. Sometimes I'm doing straight PR for them. Sometimes I'm kind of a coach. Sometimes I'm literally sitting there trying to figure out how to get a product to market. So I think, I've always been flexible. I've always been really curious. I have a little mantra, which is a quote by Peter Drucker, which is really, the two main things about a successful business, or to keep a business successful, are innovation and marketing. So the marketing side is obvious, right? We all know what we need to do about that, but it's the innovation side. So that's what keeps it exciting. How can we change, And, if I can just talk to Beth for 1 second about designer discovery. I mean, that's an extraordinary program that you co-founded that is never existed before and is like total innovation. I think it's still in the process of evolving, right?
It is. And I think that going back to this idea of passion, for me, it's passion and pressure. Like for me, some of the biggest, best pivots I've made in life was because I was literally on the floor, practically in the fetal position, thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. Or the pressure of something felt so overwhelming that it was almost like I either had to just bail out or I had to pony up and innovate. And I think that if COVID has done anything for us, for our businesses, it's helped all of us to just get to the root of what do we need to do to survive this. And out of that, I think most people that I've talked to have said their businesses are better off because of it and thriving because of it in a new way or a better way. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's really what designer discovery was. It was kind of in that pressure moment of going back to, I've got all these clients that I want to help. I want to help them in a boutique way. I realize I can't do that anymore by myself. And I don't even know where to start. I don't know how to do it. I didn't even know what step to take. And so it was just taking that small little step of reaching out to one friend, Joseph, putting a call into him, and then letting those wheels start turn, of what can we do together? And then that developed into something else. And every single month that this program changes. And, I love the fact that, Melissa, I've met you because of your friendship with Joseph. And, Joseph knew, okay, I can call Melissa and say, hey, you're watching this. What's good? What's not working? And you can call Joseph and say, this is not going well, or this is going well with designer discovery. And that type of community feedback, I think is how we're going to see some really great things come out of this. And I feel like that's really where designer discovery is. It's in that infancy stage, but, I think the innovation was rooted in a lot of pressure and a lot of stress and great friendships.
That's true.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Melissa?
It did. Thank you.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room. So the elephant in the room is fear.
Mm-hmm.
And for most people, and I mean, Beth, you just mentioned it a little bit. And fear can either paralyze you, it can motivate you, it can give you that sort of stop-start moment. So what's the scariest part of when you're in that moment of fear? What does it feel like? And how do you try to get through it? You know?
I think my fear in my business is like boredom or kind of like flatlining. And I think that is where a lot of my pivots come from. It comes from like a need to constantly be thinking and often I'm usually not shy of any ideas. I usually have too many, and then that can paralyze you. But I think it's always better to have an abundance of things you're constantly interested in or wanting to pursue to better your business than to just like coast. Like that is a big fear. I never want to be in the part where I like look back a year and like, dang, nothing really happened. I mean, I paid the bills, I signed some projects, but like nothing beyond the basics, And so that I think is what really, that's my version of fear, is just being kind of like bored and flat and really like uninspired. And so for me, one of the things I do to kind of combat that is, I keep a kind of like a log of just different ideas and different sort of, maybe different, I guess like revenue streams or different little channels, different channels that can attached to the business, but also just to keep myself inspired and look at for me, I love culture, I love to travel. So this is like painful right now. Like when I was supposed to go to Bali this year, I was like so excited about it. But so on the flip side, so I can't go to Bali at the moment. I've gotten so many books. I love, most designers are pretty much coffee table book junkies anyways, but I feel like that sort of heightened during COVID, like just books and to tune in to other types of style architecture, to look even at fashion that inspires me. So that's one of the things, is I just try to keep myself inspired and looking to other creative outlets, like even graphic design. Like I did that for a very short amount of time right out of school, and I loved it. And even that, like just graphics, while it's totally not exactly interior design, just that kind of creative energy and how you put something together. So to constantly keep myself inspired, I think is my tool that I use to try to combat the boredom,
the fear,
or
fear. So that probably for each of you looks a little bit different. So Donna, what does fear look like? And what, if you think in your business, what was probably like the scariest time, and how did you sort of get through that?
So it's really interesting, because I would say maybe my biggest fear now is, that I'm segueing back into the art world, but on canvas. And I find there's a vulnerability, right? Like you can do something, and is it good? Is it not good? You think it's good. And so in some ways you are really sure. So that vulnerability is there. And I find in other areas, I've always had a great background, fellow interior designer. So when I ran into challenging situations, I wasn't always fearful, because I knew I could make a phone call, right? And maybe this time there's no phone call to make but to myself, and putting things out there, and that's a vulnerability, and you feel fearful by it. But I also think that, someone once said to me when very early on in my career that, Donna, if you want to make things happen, you have to be the one to make it happen. It's not going to just happen on its own, if you will. And so I think, you have to take chances. You have to take a leap of faith in certain times, and you're going to fall, but you get up and you figure out how you're going to make a twist and turn to make adjustments to succeed in a way that feels right for you. And what you're after. So I think there's always a sense of fear, but probably for me now with the artwork, circling back to that, I think that's where I'm most fearful right now.
Okay, but you're out there, and as you look back, it's like as I said in the beginning, when you look back, you realize like, oh my God, I got through that fear. Yeah, this too shall pass.
Yes,
The next
you
thing.
shall pass. The best saying ever.
Exactly. You know, as I said to one of my children, you know, you can have a do-over at any part. You can start your day over at any hour. You know, you can wake up and be in a crappy mood. You can, you know, everything can be going wrong. You can take a couple breaths and you can start over. And so, you know, it's those kinds of things that I think as entrepreneurs and running companies and firms, you know, there's definitely an inherent sense of fear. Beth and Melissa, do you have anything to share on that?
Well, you know, my starting a business and then having COVID hit and losing the client that I thought was going to be my anchor client, like all within the same couple of months, was really a scary time, honestly. And I'm still scared every now and again. And I, you know, I get anxiety and panic stricken and I think, you know, and then I always bring it back to the fact that basically whenever I'm afraid in my business, I realize that you can either like forget everything and run or face everything and rise, basically. And so I
Great
my
quote.
own, pardon?
So that's a great quote. I love that.
Yeah, notice I didn't curse in the first one.
That was a good one. I'm mentally writing that one down.
Good, okay. But truthfully, you know, you have to examine where your chokehold is. Like, what's the thing that's like keeping you? And pretty much, at least as far as business is concerned, and obviously, you know, there are catastrophic shifts that happen outside of our area of control, but the biggest obstacle is usually me. And so I have to get in the right frame of mind, get out of my own way, not obsess about how I'm going to do it, but like, why am I doing it? What's the story? How can I serve my clients more, better? How can I add value in advance for them? How can I be of service, period? And that usually works.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. It's getting out of our own heads.
Yeah.
That's the other one. The stinking thinking. You know, you just spend, if you spend too much time in your own head, you know, those thoughts ruminate. Before you get to Beth. So I know Melissa, and I'll just share my like really scary moments. And I created over the last 5 years, I've created a pop-up shop in Paris during Maison and Deckoff. And that is how I actually really got to know Melissa. And I, you know, started it. There were not only riots, but there were a number of things in Paris. And we, you know, the people doing the rug the week before, you know, pulled out. Melissa's attitude and all these things, and she's lived through each of them. And there's some catastrophic, at least in my mind, which really is not, you know, nothing that dire, but it's pretty bad when there's a lot of pressure on you. She's like, don't worry, it'll all work out, right, Melissa? Always.
And I was right.
All 5 years. So when you have a problem, you just call Melissa, and you know what she says? It'll work out. And it's like, you're pulling your hair out. And I'm like, yeah, right. So now I have faith in Melissa. So when she has those things, I will be coming back to her as a fairly new business owner and say, yes, Melissa, this too will work out. Don't you worry about it. Don't you worry. So Beth, let's hear yours.
Myself, my own advice. So
right, exactly.
Well, like what Donna said, like getting through those fears and those like awkward moments. I mean, you need to have those people to call on. Like you need to have your tribe of trustworthy people. And I have found over the years, sometimes the best advice isn't always from the person within your same industry. You know, it's like that outside perspective that you're like, what? I didn't even think of it like that. Or you totally shined a light in a different way. And that really helps. But yeah, I mean, you can't be out there on an island. That will not get you through the hard times, and that will not push you, you know, motivate you to keep going.
I also think, we see so much on social media and online, and not being fearful to reach out to somebody. I mean, there have been times where I've seen something online and I thought, geez, I'd like to know a little bit more about that. And I've sent emails to complete strangers who've been in the industry and say, hey, I've seen this online. This is what I'm interested in. Would you share some further information on that? Yes, we want to tap into our tribe, but also not being afraid to reach outside of that to other people who are in this industry who we don't know. I think right now with, Instagram and all these other things, you're able to make friends and connections all over the world. And I think there's a lot of people who are willing to be helpful to other people and share resources. So not being fearful to reach out.
One of closed mouth doesn't get fed. That's my little thing.
Yeah, that's perfect.
And Beth just mentioned that, when you were talking about how your business evolved from being in your family business and starting the Dove Agency and what have you, really, not only supporting your clients, but if you couldn't support them, finding someone who could. So strengthening the connections outside of, the day-to-day, and having, a network of people that you can connect with. I actually, interestingly enough, I just got a call for a piece of new business from a financial advisor who has a really niche specialization in developing financial plans for parents who have very disabled children and who want to put a financial plan together. Well, that's not in my wheelhouse typically, but as we started to have a conversation, I realized, I actually know other people. I know a designer who I can connect him with, who can help. I know this person. I think that's the whole wonderful thing to kind of come out of, in many ways, all of us being a little more open, a little more vulnerable in some way, a little more real, on Zoom calls with no makeup on and our hair in a high ponytail. Like it's a reality check, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Beth, do you have anything you want to share?
Well, I mean, going back to that idea of fear, I think that when through COVID, I would say, there was that initial fear that I had of how are we going to just get through to the next week when everything shut down and you just didn't know what was coming next. And I think that what I've probably personally learned the most through all of this is that I can't control what tomorrow is going to bring. Mm-hmm. And for somebody who doesn't like to give up control, during this process, I've learned not just to trust that my team is going to support me, I'm going to support them, but we'll figure out a way to get through it, And we had a situation happen with one of our teammates over at the Dove Agency that she just is a linchpin in a lot that we do. And she had a horrible biking accident and broke both of her arms. And, she hasn't been able to use either of her hands. And she does so much for our team. And that was for me, again, that moment, I just, my the heart just fell, my stomach I just felt so sick. Cause I was like, not only for her, but just for, realizing that we had now an obstacle that our team was either going to rise to the challenge or we were going to look at each other and think, well, you've got to do it, or you've got to do it, and start pointing fingers. And that moment of fear, I think it would have been a lot harder for me if I hadn't already seen the team rise to the challenge of COVID. And so I think every time I get over any of these moments that tend to just shine a light on the people around me and how strong the people around me are, it makes me feel like, okay, I don't really need to fear that much. And I think going back to that idea of community and engagement, I've realized, okay, I'm so thankful to have that in my own nucleus and with my own team, but I can have that in a bigger sense also with the community. And I feel like that is really where I see the next, hopefully for the rest of my career, is focusing on that idea of, yes, you've got your nucleus and they're going to help you overcome fear, but there's also a lot of people out there that you can call on that desire to help and desire to help you out. So it's been a learning 8 months for us over here at the Dove Agency and with Designer Discovery, for sure.
Yeah. It's getting a toolbox. I think that's one of the things I've learned is that it's important to build a toolbox, and that toolbox can have many different components to it, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, getting your advisors and your peers and different things, because as you move through your business and grow and change, there's going to be definitely things that come that you don't know how to handle. And going forward, you know, as we've all sit and witnessed, at least in, you know, this time period, it's different. You know, I started my business right during the 87 crash. So, you know, it was like the 87 crash. Okay, that's a good time, like COVID, start your business. Yep. And after that, then it was like, you know, then you had 9/11, then you had 2008. And it's like, really? Do I have to do this again? Do I keep going? Do you reinvent yourself? You know, what are the next things? What can you add and what can you test? I think for me, it's just sort of interesting that, you know, I've pivoted and added some different components to the business. You know, I created a Greenwich Design District. I've done the Paris pop-up and all these things. And, you know, I hear the words like passion. Absolutely. I can go in boom, 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 boom. The thing I look at in today's world is like, what I'm going to add next. The business plan and the monetizing have to be there before that passion goes. Because that was probably for me the biggest learning lessons in those two other adventures that were not part of my day-to-day core competencies, was that passion drove me. It got the whole thing, got the framework, and it sailed before the business model married to it. And so that's just one of the things in looking at today's time, because there's a lot of things that are going to come out. There's a lot of new opportunities, ways of doing business changing. But I think as an older, you know, 34 years as an older business owner, it's like, okay, does it check off all these boxes? Doesn't mean I'm going to be stagnant. But I think, you know, as you're making those changes, you know, there's more to risk on some things and there's a lot of learning. And I think the thing that I heard here today was really interesting. It's testing the waters, you know, testing, you know, using your team, using the village, you know, gathering information before going head on into that new area, but not allowing the fear, as you say, to paralyze you.
I don't know if any of you guys have read, there's a book by Seth Godin called The Dip. Have any of you guys read that?
Oh,
It's,
yes.
It's one of my all-time favorite books.
Yep.
It's called The Dip. And it basically, it's kind of the principle of, and going back to kind of the art of the pivot, where does that all start? It's really knowing when to quit and when to stick. And that's, you know, he talks about, you have to know if you're doing something pretty early on, are you spending all this effort and all this attention and all this money on something that really, it's just a cul-de-sac, you kind of need to quit it? Or is this something worth it? Stick to it, do what you got to do, you know, okay, you know, COVID hits, one of your major team members breaks both of her arms and can't use the computer, you know, all these things happen. And there's that moment of like, okay, this is not a quit moment. This is just a stick it out, put the pieces in place, figure out what you got to do and rise above it. Versus I've been in other things in my life where I could keep beating my head against a wall all day long. And the reality was it was destined for failure from the beginning. And I would have been so much better off had I just quit that earlier on. And I think it was really only with experience in my life was I able to start recognizing it sooner. And maybe that's why you fail a lot when you're young, so that you can gain all that experience early, so that when you're at this stage in your career, you can kind of recognize those things faster. But that book actually has made a major difference for me several times when I've been in that moment of like, is it a cul-de-sac? Is it just a dip? What is this?
Right.
And figuring it out.
It's funny you say that, because there's been a couple times in my career where I've been going about my day and I think to myself, oh, I'm not sure how much longer I can do this. Mm-hmm. And those times when I even start thinking that, I know that a pivot is coming, or an adjustment, or a slight correction. The fact that that even goes through my head at that moment just makes me think, there's a reason, there's some change that needs to happen. Is it I've overbooked myself on jobs? Is it, whatever reason why I'm thinking, or I just don't want to be doing something any longer, or the client fit isn't right. There's so many reasons why we could all be saying that. But I know for me, when I even think about that, I think, I need to think a little deeper on this.
Yeah,
It shouldn't be so hard. I just, hearing, I think it was Brené Brown speak, you talk, and it's like, it's, as you say, it's that let it go, let it flow. It's like, it shouldn't be so hard. And when it really feels like you're fighting upstream, you are fighting upstream. That's not your imagination. And she's like, I just remember her talking, she said, you are fighting. You're fighting for your life. Well, stop fighting. Stop fighting, because you're putting all of this energy into that fight. And then there's nothing left, as you know, to have for the creativity, for the art, to have the ideas for the out of the box for the clients and things like that.
Do you guys find, like, I've heard that, I've heard her say that, but I also, where you focus is where your energy flows. So at a certain point, I don't know, Laura, have you had an experience like that where you were kind of drawn into the negative side of things and couldn't, like, shift into, not fighting for your life, but just knowing it was going to be okay and kind of moving forward?
I think it's usually like, maybe for me, maybe a little different in that, like, you ignore the warning signs. Maybe you ignore like the red flags because you're being positive and you want to push through, and maybe it's a challenge and you're like, I'm okay with the challenge. Like, let's do that. And then, sometimes, you're like, whoa, there's no way out of this debacle. Or, ultimately, I feel like I just try to learn from those situations. Like you said, when you do kind of get out on the other side, like, take some serious mental and like written notes. Like, let's never return to that. Let's never make that. Let's never not make it something more than it was. Like, just read it for what it is. And I think that's helped me really avoid some hiccups, even, when I'm just kind of thinking back, just at the different, years of having my firm and working with different clients. Like, I'm so much more, I don't think selective is the word. It's more of just in tuned and aware to try to prevent myself from being ensnared in a situation that it's going to be painful, or, you're forced to write it out, so.
Anybody else? So does anyone have questions for us at this point? I haven't seen any. If anybody has questions.
Are any of you juggling both existing and new business models simultaneously?
And I'm definitely with the dev agency and designer discovery. It's two different animals, and definitely trying to juggle those two, and always, keep in mind that they are overlapping for sure. But like I said, designer discovery is evolving on a monthly basis. And so it's so much more now for the community as a whole than what I think I originally started out with, which was, hey, Joseph, I need to help my clients. What are you doing? What can I do? And now it's so much different than that. So I definitely think that it's difficult. I do think it's difficult trying to juggle two different models and think about them independently, and not let one dictate over the other.
Finding the balance.
Hard.
Donna, you do that as well.
I do. Right now, certainly the interior design and construction management is the bigger part of my business. So I'm really dealing with my clients directly. But now that I'm, have gone back and I'm doing the artwork, my focus is really more design. Those two client bases, one where I'm, dealing with the homeowner, but then also where I'm working with collaboratively with other interior designers to try and fit their artwork needs. So it's kind of running two separate businesses again. And it's been great because I've been able to network with so many different other interior designers. I'm really enjoying it. So it's a little bit different. It's certainly a little more work. They're two different models, if you will. But it's provided a lot of satisfaction, a lot of enjoyment, and a lot of networking with other people.
Well, it's two different sides of the brain. Right?
Yeah, well, I think, let's face it, we're all creative people, and I think we all have a lot of creative interests. And I think, Laura, you talked a little bit about that before. Sometimes it's trying to tame that creativity. We all have, I think when you're creative, you're multi-creative in a lot of different ways. It's not usually just singularly creative. And sometimes you got to tone that a little bit.
That's true.
Let's see if I had anything else here. My last question that I had for the group was, what and how do you measure success?
For me, it's enjoyment. My success, I'm happiest, and success is when I'm in, flowing. Things are flowing freely, and I'm enjoying what I'm doing. Just my level of enjoyment, I think, is really where it's at.
Mine's kind of always been how much of an impact I make. I mean, it's about what is that impact on others, and how does that change their lives or improve their lives, or whatever. It's impact.
Yeah, I have to agree. I agree with that. I mean, what I do, there aren't really metrics to measure success, other than, my own business balance sheet, which, obviously needs to be financially viable. But, I am very passionate and I care very deeply about my clients, and I'm really invested in seeing them achieve their goals, and have their businesses succeed and thrive. And if I can do that, and of course it's incremental, but if I can do that, that is truly the measure, of success as far as, what I do goes, for sure.
Yeah, I agree with Donna. I think when you're just in a groove and you're enjoying it, and it doesn't seem laborious, like you have to put effort to it, but it's not like draining you, like there's a groove. And I think also when you see the fruit, like when you're able to see the fruit of your labor, whether it's in, the expressions of happy clients, whether it's in beautiful photography, whether it's in just, helping improve someone's quality of life in their home, like that gives me a lot of enjoyment. I feel like I'm a success when I'm able to do that for clients.
I think it's those, for me, it's those aha moments, Yeah, it's like, aha, it works. The clients get it. They say thank you. They get it. No, it's, I think it's different things at different times. I think, the longer that I've been in business, I think the thing that I found that I didn't do until a few years ago really was to stop and have gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is gratitude for the clients, for the work, for the industry. And when I'm finished something, I'm always on to the next thing. Okay, what's next? We finish this next idea, move. And now I've really taken and spent those few moments to enjoy, even if it's just a meeting with a client, to really be present. And that to me is each day that I can be more present in what I'm doing. Is definitely much more beneficial and much more successful, because there will be many placements, there will be many other things, but it's just really like, all the pieces came together for this particular thing on this particular day. And that's, because it's a lot, as we all said, what we do, there's a lot of moving parts. And
we're so, so involved in our businesses day to day. We can't, we're all entrepreneurs, we can't just turn it off, even on vacation, and it's so hard to take the time to just like bask in the beauty of your own design, or in the response that your client is giving you, and and how you watch their children enjoy the room that you designed, whatever it is that makes you happy, because we're all so busy juggling everything else.
Hey guys, to see, I don't think I have any.
No, I don't think we have any questions. I'm sort of driving over here, and we hit the 5 o'clock mark.
Yeah, so I'm going to a virtual Zoom awards. So I was curious. I asked if there was a dress code for that.
Is there a dress code for
I
that?
don't know for the red lot. I'll let you know. We probably won't be seen, so it really doesn't matter.
What I'm really interested to see is, Kips Bay is having their president's dinner, and it's a virtual dinner. And that it's like, well, do I get dressed up? Do I make dinner and then sit at the table and then Zoom with everyone else, and think about with the ante. I mean, Jamie Drake's dining table, how can I even compete with that? Or Alexa Hampton, it's like, maybe I'll, turn the video off for that part of the evening.
Yeah, I don't know how to put that many people on there. So this was great. So thanks to, the collective for getting everybody together.
Thank you.
It's nice seeing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Beth.
So, make sure everybody follows everybody. You've got new friends.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank you.
great. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.